Awesome. So James, your LinkedIn says that you are wandering and exploring after an exit.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Yeah, I got absolutely rinsed for the wandering comment. Even my wife was having a go at me about that. Maybe I'll just give a quick intro as to who I am, and then I'll explain the wandering comment. So I was co-founder of a business called Saucer. I'll try and keep it brief, but we started as a marketplace for recruiters, connecting recruiters to employers. There's some real challenges with that model, and we ended up pivoting the business to a reviews platform for recruiters, and we ended up selling that business to Seek in 2021. And I did 3 years working for Seek to integrate that into the business, and I've just left that. So I've now entered the wandering phase, which was actually inspired by a post by a guy called Alex Lieberman, who's the founder of Morning Brew, which is a very popular newsletter. And he makes a point about founders who've gone through an exit, and they go through this period which is kind of like disillusionment and directionless, and you're kind of unsure. It really, like, you feel a bit stupid talking about it. It's kind of like champagne problems. It's like you've almost got a lot of opportunities in front of you, but you're almost reluctant to know what to dive into. And so I've kind of gone through this phase of just having lots of conversations with people, coming up with lots of business ideas, writing them down, speaking to people. And to be honest, coming to places like this has been a really big help for that. I think, I made the decision to move to the Sunshine Coast, and we moved up in November last year. And you kind of think when you move here that the whole startup scene just doesn't really exist, and that you're going to miss out on that. And I heard about the Perugian Digital Hub before I moved up, and stupidly, I kind of turned my nose up at it. I kind of looked, Perugian Beach, for those who don't know, is a very kind of small, sleepy little tourist town. Saw the Digital Hub was there. I'm like, yeah, it's going to be a co-working space full of, real estate agents and different things like that. And you walk into these just amazing facilities, and then you also just walk in, there's like guy with $100 million exit, there's AI startup that just raised $7 million. Like, oh my God, there's actually like legit startup scene on the Sunshine Coast. And so literally being part of a community like this has been a big help for me through my wandering phase to figure out what's next.
Yeah, I love that. Do you think because you know what it takes to do the startup and you know how much you put into it, that it gives you that sense of, well, if I'm going to do it again, I need to make sure I kind of get it right? So that's why you are...
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest things. I feel like for me, and I think a lot of people who've been to this point, is you put unrealistic expectations on yourself. It's like, okay, well, I had a startup, we exited, I've got to do something bigger next time, it's got to be more successful, and it creates this real, like, almost uncertainty about what to do, and you almost become hesitant, like, to pull the trigger. There's lots of different business ideas I've had, and it's only really in the last few weeks I've kind of shaped where it is I'm likely to go, but it's been really hard to dive into something because of that fear of going down the wrong path and getting it wrong, fear of failure, all those things. If I was advising someone else, I'd tell them not to worry about and just take action and get on with it. But it's hard when it's yourself. Like you are like emotionally involved in it, and it's it's been a weird period, but it's been really good.
Yeah, there's like an opportunity cost in what you decide to do as well, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think this place is absolutely incredible. Like, to see founders at all different stages as well has been amazing for me. So kind of a bit of my story is I moved up to the coast around about the same time, a little bit before, and I was working from home and was feeling a bit isolated and wasn't really sure what to do, but loved living here. And I did a bunch of research, tried out a few co-working spaces, saw the hub, came to see it, met the janitor, and it was totally revolutionary for me living here, because it was like the final piece. It's like kind of my people. Like, you get to be around people that love tech, and like I've never, just in general, like startup founders and like those kind of folks, like they've got so much time. Like, they give you so much time. They want to help you because they know what it kind of takes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's the good thing about being around people like that is, most startup founders or people that are in that space are perpetual learners. They like to share and learn from each other. And I think that's different to normal co-working spaces where it tends to be a little bit more isolated. So yeah, totally get that. So we're going to talk about recruitment, obviously. Yes. So, I was a recruiter before I started Saucer. You are a recruiter now. Yep. So we've seen like the industry from a few different sides. I know one thing you're particularly passionate about is candidate experience. I think there's a lot of, we've kind of gone from a very hot market where candidates had a lot of power and control. We've now moved into a more candidate long market. And there's a sense that from a candidate experience perspective, companies have maybe, a year or two ago, it was all about candidate experience. I feel like now that's dropped off a little bit as the power has really shifted back to the employer. But I know you're really passionate about the candidate experience space. Why do you think from an employer's perspective it's still important, given we're in such a candidate long market?
The reason I think it's so important is because things are going to change, and you can already see that it is starting to turn. So there's a couple of reasons. Like the first one would be just from a purely human element, like looking after your people, especially in difficult times or when things aren't great. You get that loyalty tenfold. But then the second part, like I've been talking to a lot of founders recently, and they'll say, oh, there's loads of applicants on the market. We'll be able to pay a bit less. We can get better talent, or we can get the talent that we couldn't get before. Anyone who's thinking like that right now, you might have the talent just now, but I can guarantee you as soon as things shift, they'll be gone. So why not get ahead of it, and why not make your startup, your company, known to be an amazing place for people to work? So to create a great candidate experience from before they even join. And that's why I think it's so important. When I talk to companies, I say, you've got a great brand, your company's awesome, but your hiring processes don't really reflect that. And if you create that experience, you can then measure the success of it on the people that don't get the job. That's what I do, and I ask candidates, what was your experience? And they actually become promoters of your company, of your startup, which I think is just a huge opportunity to not just drive your own brand and your own story, but also look after your people, and then you're going to keep them for much longer.
Yeah, I mean, there was a really interesting case study on that done years ago. I think it was Virgin Media talking about the impact candidate experience actually has on revenue, particularly if you're in a B2C space, like the impact of poor candidate experience on your business as those people go out and talk to people about the experience of going through that recruitment process with you. And it's shown that it's been really significant. I think that's something a lot of businesses don't think about when they're going through the recruitment process. And that's probably why they don't invest in it, is they're not realizing the impact it can have on their business, on one, their employer brand and them speaking to other candidates, but two, on their actual business in terms of revenue. And the Virgin Media example, I think, was people literally cancelling subscriptions and telling their friends and family about it, and like, it can have a really, really big impact.
Oh, 100%. And I think also there's an element of when the market was a bit different, it was like, we need to do all these things to attract candidates, right? So companies were doing crazy things, and like you say, candidates had the power and had the control. But at that point in time, I was telling candidates, like, don't get carried away here, because that's going to change too, right? And when the market changes, like, you need to be aware that you're not always going to have, like, it's just power dynamics, right?
Yeah.
But the way that I see it is that there's a massive opportunity, and I think as things go further and further, like when I was talking to the head of enterprise at LinkedIn, she was saying like social proof and knowing like what a business is like to work at, recommendations, who do you know, that's going to become so important as time goes on. It already is, but it's going to become even more important. And if you're known for having a great experience and looking after your staff, you're actually going to find people, you're going to be able to find talent you wouldn't be able to find elsewhere. And then, and recruiters might not like this, but when recruiters tap your people up, they actually then start telling recruiters how good the place is to work, and that's how your culture spreads, because recruiters start talking about it's really hard to get people from that company because they actually look after their people.
Yeah, I always think it's businesses who invest counter-cyclically, and what I mean by that, and take for us too, coming from agency recruitment, I think in agency recruitment, there's always and I saw this a lot in my last role, there are agencies who will move with the market, and so when it's candidate short, they will be all about business development. And then when it's, the other way around, it's candidate short, they'll be all about candidate experience. And when it's candidate long, it's all about business development. And they tend to move with the market. And I think the best agencies are the ones that have some element of operating counter-cyclically, which means that when the candidate market is long, they're still investing in candidate experience. When the job market is long, they're still investing in building relationships and client experience. And I think that's true for businesses as well, that rather than just looking at where the market is now, if you can build good foundations, when the market turns, it really sets you up.
Oh, without a doubt. Like an example of that would be like when COVID happened, and there was a period of time when basically we thought the world was going to end, right? And I remember thinking, what are we actually going to do? I was in Melbourne at the time, and I spent like about a week or so, a couple of weeks, literally just calling every single person I knew, candidate and client, and just asking how they were doing.
Yeah.
Like, how are you feeling? Part of it was making me feel better too, because I'm like,
Yeah.
it can't just be me that's thinking like this. But I still remember specific conversations I had with people, and it was such a difficult time. But after that, when the boom happened and it went crazy, first call, they were calling, can you help us? Can you look after
Yeah.
us? Because you looked after them at that time too. So it's just my principles. I'm not really thinking about it as the market, but I think a lot more recruiters could think like that, because it can change very, very quickly.
100%. I mean, we saw in that period in COVID where people invested in relationships, it just paid off tenfold when the market turned.
For sure.
Obviously, being part of the Parisian Digital Hub, it's an AI hub, so it would be silly not to be talking about AI's impact on recruitment.
Yeah.
And I think maybe if we start with the job seeker side, because
Yeah.
there's some really interesting tools that I think are really positive, and there is some really interesting tools that could be positive that are being used very poorly, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There seems to be this trend in the market of let's get AI to create a bullshit CV and spam it out to 4,000 jobs.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so damaging for the job seeker. It's creating so much work for everyone. And I just don't get it. But I think there's lots of potential really good upside in those kind of tools. But what are you seeing for job seekers from an AI perspective?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a tool, and they see it and they go, oh, well, what I can do is I can just do more. So I can do more applications, I can get across more, it's a volume game. That is not a good strategy at all. What I'm personally seeing is apply to less roles. So from a candidate perspective, right, what I'm doing at the moment, and this goes for every level, right up to C-suite, I talk to candidates, and what I'm seeing is they feel like the clients have the power, so they sort of feel like, oh, I need to apply for more roles, and I'll apply for lower level roles, and I'll try and get as many applications as possible out there. And I got asked last week by a couple of candidates, what's your advice on how do I apply for lower level jobs? And my advice was clear: don't apply, don't actually do it. And they're like, oh, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you're not going to get contacted. It's going to affect your confidence, because you're ultimately trying to apply to a role that is not at your level. And then you question your own worth and go, well, can I actually do that job? So just don't apply in the first place. Instead, my advice is look at who the recruiter is or who the hiring manager is and find out, is there a path to some dialogue with them? So is there a common connection on LinkedIn? Can you get an intro, or can you just ask for a conversation? And what that often does is it can actually change the role based on the person's experience, because they can see, well, this person can bring more value. But what it can also do is it can actually offer a different role completely, because the client can then see, well, actually this person can come in and do something very, very different, but the power dynamics are very different. If you apply to a job and send your resume, you're already saying, I want that job. And if you are, in my opinion, you're less qualified, clients are going to be nervous about how long you're going to be in the role, and you're probably not going to be in the role very long either.
Yeah. And I think, we've moved into this world of AI, and too many people look at it as a numbers game, rather than looking at finding the right roles that are relevant to them and taking a more strategic approach, rather than just submitting a CV and leaving it at that. There are the type of tactics that you've mentioned that can really make a difference in helping people stand out. I think we'll get onto specific tactics for job seekers later, but are there any other specific tools for job seekers that you've seen out there from an AI perspective that you think are quite interesting?
Without a doubt. So I've probably gone full circle on this, right? I very stupidly put out a post, this was pre-Hub days, of like, there is no place for AI in recruitment. And like, I put my flag in the ground, I'm like, that's it. And then I actually steel-manned my own argument, and I was like, is there a place for it, and where can it actually be useful? And where I see it is, a lot of people are using it as like a creator. So like, I'll take ChatGPT and I'll just create a resume, or I'll take ChatGPT and I'll create a position description or whatever. It's not so much a creator as like a curator. So if you can give it really good information and train it, it can be super helpful to find things that you didn't think before. It can give you a different perspective on how to think, how to actually approach it. What I use it a lot for, this is more tactical, but I use it a lot to say, why am I wrong about this thing? So I believe this, so I believe in the candidate experience, and I think it's one of the most important things. Why am I wrong? Like, what's the counter argument to that? And it's actually gave me stuff, and I thought, well, actually, that's a good point. You could say that, but it really gives me the opportunity to not just fall into like bias and looking for confirmation of what I believe. So I think candidates can do that too. So there seems to be a lot of fear around candidates, like how do I put a resume together? How do I make it the best template? How do I make it really stand out? And again, they're going down the route of using a ChatGPT or something and just spamming their resume everywhere. Where I've saw the most success is take your time, really understand what your value is. What are you looking for? Where are your gaps? If you have some gaps, you've got an opportunity at the moment to fill them, particularly in AI. So do short courses, do some things to kind of level up your foundational skills in those areas, because it's going to be absolutely massive, right? I think most of us will be generous in the future. And then the second part is use it to kind of help you in the process. So here's my resume draft, and what sort of things should I be looking for to position myself in that role, kind of thing. The other thing I would say about candidates too is it's not just a resume. Like, start thinking about it as a brand. So start thinking about yourself as a brand on LinkedIn. So what do you want to be known for? Who do you want to be communicating with? What sort of information should you be putting out there? Because I think that is actually even more important than a resume, which might be controversial, but you can't look at everyone's resume.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's going to be really interesting as to where the resume goes in this. I think we're moving to a world where, and we'll get onto the higher side in a second, where we got all these CVs created by AI screening all the CVs, and it's just AI talking to AI. And I just wonder whether, and I've always thought this for a while, and I put a post up about this recently on LinkedIn, like the whole process of the CV is just intriguing to me. The concept of a CV was made 500 years ago. And basically, for 95% of jobs, this is the process. You condense like 10 years of your experience into 1 or 2 pages. You send it across, a human looks at it for 8 seconds and makes a gut instinct decision as to whether you get an interview. That is basically the process that 95% of the world works on, and it seems absolutely nuts to me. And I just wonder when, as we move into this world, whether that's going to change and whether the CV is going to be the key way that people are assessed as to whether they go into an interview process.
For sure. I mean, Kris sent us something the other day, and it was the director of the company put his own resume through the process to see what would happen, and he got rejected for the role.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you. I think it's a bit of an arbitrary process. It still has value, but what I'm saying to a lot of candidates at the moment is think about it like you are kind of, you're not just building a brand, but take that little bit of extra care. The other thing that from a candidate perspective, and I don't think, I think some candidates get this, but think about where is your resume going? What desk is it landing on? And what is that person looking for? So you might have a resume and it might have a bunch of amazing achievements on it, but is it relevant to the person it's actually being sent to? And I think tailoring it and just putting the information that's required for that audience, that's where you're going to get the most success. Spamming people with your resume is a horrible idea. I would also say one more thing, batch apply to things. And what I mean by that is, say you're a job seeker and you're looking for something at the moment, sit down, figure out what you want, what you don't want. That's really effective. What do I want to run away from, right? Yeah. And that's usually your experiences that you've had. Where's the gaps? How can I plug them? What's my value? What am I exceptional at? Then that might be my opinion, but what social proof do I have? What recommendations do I have? Who's referred me? What feedback have I been given? Can I somehow display that in an authentic way that tells the story of what I've done? I think start thinking of those things, and also start understanding it's still a two-way process. Do not go into a process and go, I have to be perfect and I have to win this job. Go in and assess the company and say, well, I'm going to make a decision to go work for you, so why are you right for me and why am I right for you? It's an exchange of value at the end of the day. And I think I try to tell candidates that, like, think about it more like that, and don't think about it as they have all the power and I don't have any, because I think you then do things that you wouldn't normally do.
Yeah, 100%. I think to move on to the topic of AI from a candidate perspective, one of the really interesting things, depending how it's implemented, is skills-based hiring. And so skills-based hiring means giving the ability for people to show their skills rather than just talk about them. And I think we've seen over the last few years and recently a lot of people very frustrated because they just don't get this opportunity to show what they can do. For whatever reason, their CV is getting rejected at the interview stage, and that potentially now there is a world where rather than using the CV, we could actually put people through a skills assessment as part of the screening process. This has pros and cons. There are the optimistic side is everyone gets an opportunity to show what they can do. And there is technology out there now that can use AI to screen people at scale. There's some people who have concerns about that. Will it bring bias in? Will it be accurate? But broadly, I think this is a really interesting concept. On the con side, there is it the right thing to do to have someone complete an assessment before they've even had the chance to speak to a person in the interview process? I know particularly in I know you do a lot of tech recruitment. This is topical in that space because some developers are okay with tech assessments, some hate tech assessments, and I think it would give more of them the opportunity to show their capability rather than some that get screened out in that 8-second CV screen. So I'm unsure as to how that goes, but what do you think about that kind of model?
Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. The one thing I would say is it's like straight to candidate. If the very first thing that they get is an AI, I don't think we're quite there yet. And I think it's maybe akin to if someone was just randomly reaching out to someone and they don't know them. It's the trust, right? It's understanding what are you going to do with this information. Obviously, we've been kind of chatting to Julian, and we've kind of tried out the product, etc. And where it was super effective, the Fairgo product, where it was super effective for me was after the trust was built. So I was working with a client, and it was would like to ask a few really technical questions to an engineer and would like them to do a kind of technical assessment and would like to see their kind of problem solving and how they go about it in real time where they don't have time to prep and stuff, and you can do that at scale. I think for something like that, it's really, really effective because you've built the trust with the person and they know why you're doing it. The other thing I think it could be incredibly effective for, if you look at like the democratization of education and how a lot of people will just have what you would never have access to, like a private, highly customized tutor. I see it playing a fundamental part in that. Imagine having a co-pilot, a tutor that understands you deeply, and then you can practice interviewing. So you can practice competency-based interviewing, you can practice how to structure your answer, you can practice good questions. I think if it's a force for how do I get better at the in-person thing, I think it's like revolutionary. But I think if it's replacing the person thing, I think it's problematic.
Yeah, I think it is certainly in most of recruitment. I think it's where we need to break recruitment down, right?
Yeah.
You've got executive recruitment, you've got volume recruitment, and I do think there is a world where your lower end volume, more casual roles do become 80, maybe 100% automated in some cases. And that's where you've got to think about the dynamics of the role. If it's a casual worker who just wants a job and a company who just wants a pair of hands to do a role, you can see that the tech is really getting there to match those people together. I think, we'll talk a bit about agency recruitment because a lot of people have asked me what I think as to how AI impacts agency recruitment. You're obviously still in that space. And to me, I think that good recruiters who are specialists, who have good offline networks, who really understand their space, can advise on types of roles to hire, organizational structure, hiring strategies, those kind of things, I think will continue to do well and probably get even more in demand in the market as we move to a world of more automation. However, I think there is still a large part of the agency market, and I'm pretty confident of this, that is made up of recruiters who basically take an order from someone, post a job on a job board, do some basic screening, flick candidates across and charge 15 grand for it. And to me, if I was in that space, if I was the recruiter in that, I'd be very, very worried over the next few years, because I just think there's very little value added in that. And I think that space continues to get eroded over the next few years. But I don't know what you think about that.
I could not agree with you more. I think if you are doing an average job or an okay job as a recruiter, I think you should be worried. I think if you're using these tools at the moment and you're not actually, as you say, leveling up the company, I think you should be worried. What I've saw in the way I work with clients, and I've kind of always done this, like a specific client I'm working with right now, it's like not only hiring, but it's like how do we level you up in a lot of different ways. So it might be, can we give you contacts in certain areas? Can we help with brand? Can we help with story? Again, goes back to candidate experience. It's all tied to how do we improve the experience to almost kind of give them the power to then do more hiring themselves in the future.
Yeah.
And that's the world I see, where there's a certain level of person that you need, and it might not even be just hiring through AI. I think there'll be expert AI agents that do things really, really well from an execution perspective. But I think you'll then still have people from a strategic point of view.
Yeah.
And we were chatting about something before we went live, which I think is unbelievably interesting, which is, imagine all of the like senior recruiters or people that have been in this space for a long time, the knowledge that they all of a sudden have a proposition to say, we could actually go into startups, we could go into these companies, and you could create an AI agent, a model around all of that knowledge base and level that company up, and they could do a lot of their hiring themselves, which I think is a really interesting thing as well.
Yeah, like I think there is part of recruitment that gets broadly automated, but I think there is going to be a premium on human experience, and I think for so much of the market, there will still be that desire to work with humans for it.
Yeah.
And I also think to that point we were talking about before, is what I think is really interesting and exciting is the ability for AI and automation generally to just increase the output of recruiters. And we were talking about there are so many businesses and I particularly see this in like small business.
Yeah.
Small business, and I like to broad brush it, and I've been a small business as well. Small businesses struggle with hiring really badly. They don't understand what to hire. They don't understand market rates. They don't understand what they're capable of hiring. They struggle with process, all those kind of things. But for a lot of them, and for some of these, more junior roles, it just does not commercially make sense to use a recruiter today. But there is the optimistic view is that if recruiters can embed this technology correctly, that they can increase their output, and that's going to mean potentially that they can decrease the price and still generate the same amount of revenue. So what I mean by that, if we take a perm recruiter today, generally they'll be doing somewhere between 2 and 4 placements a month. Well, maybe that goes to 8 to 10 placements a month, because the delivery is taken care of more in automation and they can do more of the higher value human stuff. That means you can drop the price, but increase the units of output. And so that's going to mean that for, some of these small businesses that previously it made no sense to pay 15 grand for, but maybe it makes sense to pay 6, 7, 8 grand for, that actually we could be in a position where recruiters can just help more people than they can today. That's my optimistic view of it. Whether it plays out like that, I don't know. But I think there's so many businesses that will get so much value from working with a recruiter, but the commercials just don't line up today.
Yeah, and I'm a good example of that around like process and execution and where AI has been helpful. Again, still manning the argument. Like, I still believe like you don't take something that's AI and it goes to the final person, the candidate or the client, but the back end processes, the CRM, like a lot of the stuff that quite frankly would drive me insane is all just now done, that I feel like I spend even more time just talking to clients, talking to candidates, as opposed to trying to do all this other stuff that would have slowed me down before. And I think that's just going to multiply. It's just going to be on steroids, right? Like, but again, I think there is a level of the market that will disappear. And it will actually become harder to find really good partners. But I actually think that's a very good thing, because everyone raises their game. And then it's, again, the same with candidate experience, client experience being a recruiter. So then all of a sudden clients are not saying, well, I'll spread my bets and use 4 recruiters because they're all going to be doing the same thing. It's like I'm actually going to align myself with someone who cares about my company, cares about my brand, and we'll actually become partners. And for me, I think that's really exciting because that's how I work. And I mean, a lot of the recruiters I know, they ultimately want to do a good job. And if they focus on doing an exceptional job, they're going to do better rather than worse in this type of market, is my belief.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the other things we talked about as well was, with all this AI and automation coming around is, email, for example. Email is already saturated, and I think we're likely to see email get to the point where it's almost unusable. And I hope there is some startup in the world figuring out how we solve that, because it's like, I know your inbox is like, but mine is just smashed.
Yeah, it's mad.
And so I think what also is going to command a premium in agency side is recruiters who have really strong personal brands, who can command attention from their candidate base.
Yeah.
Because I think it's going to be increasingly difficult. Like, the world we've been in for the last 5 years, it's like set up a email sequence, blast emails out, spam it out to everyone and see if we can get the attention. I think that just disappears. So I think, and now we're moving into a world where AI can personalize those emails. So, it's not just sending the same templatized ones, they're going to send personalized ones. And so it's going to get to a point where it's going to be just, I think, difficult to get the attention of candidates by just smashing emails.
Yeah.
And so those recruiters have really good offline networks, but also have really strong online personal brands and can command attention of candidates. I think you're going to be in a really good spot in a few years from now.
Without a doubt. And the in-person stuff and the high-touch stuff, that's just going to become even more of a premium, because if you think about, if a lot of what we're going to be doing is using AI and we're sort of not, we don't have that human element, I think it drives the value of in-person and the value of looking after people and helping people and how can I connect other people around me and how do I kind of add value to them. That's just going to become even more important, because like I say, there's going to be these kind of AI agents, or there'll be a lot of stuff that's doing the kind of high admin back office type stuff. But I actually think that is really exciting for founders, for people in tech, because a lot of creativity that's maybe not allowed to be unleashed because you're so busy trying to do all this other stuff that slows you down. Yeah. Maybe this is a utopia. Maybe I'm being too positive about it. I've gone full circle here. Yeah. But I really believe that it's going to unleash a lot of people in their creativity and let them do stuff they might not be able to do elsewhere. They might not have to scale to a 50-person team because they've now got the ability and technology to do it in a very lean way. Yeah. And focus on different things.
100%. And I'd love to see recruiters, now, and be this internal or agency, just spending more time on content and marketing and building. It blows my mind the amount of recruiters, and these are experienced recruiters as well. I see on LinkedIn who they literally post and it's like, hi, I'm hiring for this role. Click the link to find out more. It's like, you've got one fucking job, which is to market the role. And that's your only job, and that's what you do. And I'm like, the more I think we can take all this other process away, the more recruiters can spend time on the high value stuff, which is going to be commanding attention of candidates, building relationships with clients, and advising, consulting, and all the high value stuff. And we can automate away all the other crap.
Oh, without a doubt. Funny story about that. Years ago, I remember Seek, your old place, were hiring a role, and they had used a recruiter, and the recruiter was advertising Seek on Seek. They were advertising a role at Seek on Seek, but they hadn't obviously mentioned Seek, but they'd left it somewhere in the ad. So you've got a company that specialises in that is gave it to a recruiter, and that recruiter is then using their own platform to actually advertise those roles. I think I think those days will hopefully be behind us. Yeah. And I think content is king. Yeah. And it's obviously saturated right now, and you can see a lot of it. But again, the cream rises to the top.
Yeah, it's good content. I think this is the point broadly with AI, and we're talking about this with CVs earlier. I think people have this tendency to use AI and go, tell me what to write, and copy and paste it, and then put it on LinkedIn. Same with the CV, write my CV for me. It's like, it's good for helping you generate ideas, and but then you still need, today at least, to refine that and put your own spin on it. I think that's where you can stand out.
Oh, completely. And I think we move on to a few tactical tips. So some tactical tips for the first of all for clients. So particularly for our domain in the area that we love, tech startups, scale ups. If you're thinking about just now, if the market does change, but if my advice to you is, if you're thinking, how do you really sharpen the value proposition and how do you attract talent? Create an amazing experience. Measure it on the success of the people that don't get the job. going through the experience and making sure that you create a positive. If you're a great place to work, which hopefully you are, create an experience that reflects that for your hiring process. Prioritise it. Prioritise it as much as you prioritise anything else. The other thing that I don't see a lot of people talking about, I actually see the opposite, which is it's a negative, but one of the other things you can do is you can start thinking about things like sponsorship. You can start thinking about, how do I offer candidates things that maybe other companies, now these startups and scale-ups have the opportunity to do it. There's been a few rule changes around sponsorship and how many days they can be employed, etc. And start thinking about things like that you can really stand out, because I think that is going to be huge. And the final thing is, and I do this with candidates when I'm going through the process, I'm always trying to think of areas of development or areas where they can level up. As an employer, as you're going through that process, start to understand what they are. Get HR, get people in culture, get them involved in that process and start shaping development plans for these employees coming into the business, because you can almost guarantee that if you level them up when they're in the organisation, you're going to have them longer term. And then again, it's just going to build the culture. So don't think about it once they're in the business 6 months, a year. Think about it as you're hiring. Like, because no one's perfect, right? So like, what areas can they develop, and how can we create a proposition that can actually help them? Because I honestly think that's where things are going. It's going to be, how quickly can you learn new stuff? And really, you're going to have to adapt and learn fast and move in lots of different areas, even more so than what's now. So that would be my tips for employers and people that are looking to hire. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've covered a lot of things off there. I think, broadly just staying on the theme of these AI tools, I think, you don't want to get carried away in implementing too much of it, but I think employers should be looking to explore what makes sense for their process.
Yeah.
Where I think there is definite value today is in that volume space. Like if you do volume hiring, I think there is really opportunities to actually use AI to create a better candidate experience. So what I mean by that is, if you're in a volume space, there is an opportunity now to give everybody an interview. So, and an interview when they want to do it and their time, assessed accurately and the same as everybody else. It doesn't really work today, at least in the more senior areas, but in that volume space, I think there's an opportunity to create a better experience. So there's companies like Sapio.ai, there's Vervo, there's lots of platforms that give you the opportunity to do an immediate interview or skills assessment with candidates at the start of the process. And I think it's worth everyone starting to explore where this technology could or couldn't fit without moving to let's get rid of recruiters and just put AI in place. I think we still need humans in the process, but to your point about augmenting them, I think there's a lot of opportunity to augment and upscale your recruitment team by augmenting them with these tools.
Absolutely, and the reason I like Sapia as much as their mission around like values-based hiring as well, because I think that's huge. Like if you talk to candidates, their number one reason for leaving a business is they don't feel valuable or they don't feel valued, and they're maybe not doing something that they actually feel bought into. So if you can understand those principles and the values of a person and align that with your hiring, I think you're onto something as well.
And the other thing, and to be clear, I haven't used Sapio.ai, so this is not like a particular vouch for them, but what I think is really interesting about that product is, and again in the volume space, the ability to give immediate feedback post-interview.
Yep.
I mean, what's a big, like candidate experience terms, what's the biggest things that we hear? We don't hear back from the application stage, and we don't get feedback post-interview, which is nuts. That I understand at application stage, there's a lot of debate around this, should everyone get a response? And at application stage, it can be hard for recruiters with high volumes, although theoretically, most recruiters have got a reject button. They should be able to send something. But anyone who goes for an interview should get feedback, but that's not the case. However, with technology like this, there is the ability to actually provide feedback to absolutely everybody. And in the case of these type of products, provide it instantly. And so the candidate isn't sat there going, how did I do? Or wonder what my response is going to be. They can find out instantly how they did. And precisely. I think, in that volume space, there's really interesting opportunities to create a better experience using technology.
Oh, I completely agree with you. And on the candidate side, right? I talk to them every day. There's a lot of people hurting. There's a lot of people either under redundancy or feeling like maybe they're going to have to look for a move. There's people like maybe feeling that their skill sets are becoming a bit more, they're diminishing a little bit and they're a bit worried, right? what have you seen from an AI perspective? Like, what is your advice to candidates? Because we've already said it's not mass market, like sending your resume everywhere and taking ChatGPT, making the bloody resume and sending it to 500 people. But what have you seen that's worked, or any kind of tips for people that are listening?
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered a lot of them earlier. I think it's around creating a strategy around your job search that involves, one, making sure you're applying for roles that fit your skill set. Two, making sure that you're not just applying, but if these are roles that are really of interest to you, finding out who the hiring manager is, the recruiter is, personally reaching out to them. Those things can make a massive difference. But I think broadly as well, because you touched on a lot of these points earlier, so maybe I'll talk about like AI and its impacts. There's a lot of concern that AI's impacts on jobs, and I think particularly for knowledge workers, we're just going to see such change over the next 10 years. There will be roles that are lost, there'll be new roles created, there's going to be a lot of change. But I think broadly the one thing is, I think everyone, but particularly if you're in a knowledge work role, you should be learning about this stuff. This is a really significant change. This is scaling human knowledge. And that's going to have a massive impact on knowledge workers. And so if you're not learning about this stuff now, you're going to be quite far behind in a couple of years from time, where the ability to just be so much more productive in your role is going to lean on your ability to properly use AI. So I think most job seekers could really get value from spending time learning about this stuff.
I completely agree. Tactical tip for me, for the candidates, is if you are using AI, if it's ChatGPT, if it's Claude, spend a bit of time, create a custom GPT or a Claude. But the most important thing is create the knowledge base. So put in there like a draft document of everything. Go on, take a screenshot or copy and paste your LinkedIn, all of your achievements, your reviews, like everything you can think of, your values, everything, put it all into your GPT. It's not that difficult to do it. And then use that as a bit of a kind of query engine for the things that you should put in your resume. Then the second thing you can do is you can take any job description, you can take any company's values and website, you can feed it in, and you can say, what are the non-obvious things that I could focus on that would allow me to stand out for this company? And let me be clear, you don't just take the outputs from ChatGPT or from the AI and send it straight to the hiring manager or something. That's happening all the time, and you're basically killing your chances then. What you do instead is you use this co-pilot, use it as like a second brain, use it to level up your thinking. So you can even do something like, and I've done this, I've done it for candidates. It's, okay, I think this, tell me why I'm wrong about the role, or what are the non-obvious parts of this company or role that I could really stand out with? And then another really effective one is, what can I remove from my resume that's not relevant for this role? So again, use it as a curator, use it as a little mate. Don't use it as a creator that you're just going to take the information and send it somewhere else. And if you start getting across this stuff, and one more example would be, and this is obviously our community is in tech and founders and stuff, but I've got a really good family friend of mine who's just going into employment. It's his first job. And I've saw him, and it's been amazing. I've saw him not knowing what ChatGPT is, not knowing what Claude is, not knowing what these things are, to now he's got his own wee GPT, which he had an interview for a retail shop, and he took the values. He did all of this off his own back after our conversation. He took the values of the shop. He took a few ideas around competency questioning and group interviewing techniques, fed it into this GPT with his information, asked it a bunch of questions to help him prepare for his first in-person interview. And he actually just got the job.
Oh, awesome.
Like, he did so well at the group interview, and then he did so well at the second one-on-one interview. And what I saw from it is it gave him the space to go away and go, what things should I be? So it's like an interview coach that you don't feel the pressure of having to answer. You can actually sit and give it space to say, is this right? Why would it ask me this question? And it was so funny because I asked him and he said, I over-prepared everything that they were looking for. I already had an idea of what they were going to ask. That showed me, wow, this is so powerful for all levels of individual. And I think if you're not on it now, like you say, you will fall behind. But a lot of people have got some fear around that. I see that as an opportunity. Like, spend some time and learn it, because it's just going to level you up in so many different ways.
Yeah, and I think, you know, a lot of people think this is cheating because you're
Yeah.
using AI to kind of give, but to me, it's just allowing people to put the best version of themselves forward in the interview, giving them that preparation. I don't think it's cheating to use AI to, you know, give you some guidance on the type of questions you might be asked, how you might answer them. It's then about you then taking that information and deciding for yourself how to answer that when you're in the interview.
100%, and it's democratizing the whole thing. So like, people get access to executive coaches, they get access to a lot of the stuff they wouldn't necessarily have, but it's just all about giving it all the correct information at the start.
Yeah.
And you can have a lot of fun with it as well. So yeah, I've gone full circle. Like, I'm probably promoting AI now, to be honest, but I think it's I love the hybrid approach. I love the approach of, like, level up my thinking. It helps me be better at my job. It lets me do the stuff I love doing, and it lets me not do, like, it helps me do the stuff I don't love doing, that takes up a lot of my time and kills my creativity. So I think it's an amazing opportunity.